The sound of my gift hitting the bottom of the trash can was louder than all the laughter that followed. It was my daughter-in-law, Jessica, who had thrown it there. She stood in the middle of her own baby shower, in front of all our family and friends, with a cold smirk on her face. My own son, David, just looked down at his shoes. "Friend, before I tell you the strange thing my son asked me in the car on the way home, please tap subscribe. You need to be here to see what happens when a mother's love is pushed to its limit." I didn't say a word. I just felt the heat rise in my cheeks as the party slowly, awkwardly, started up again around me. Everyone saw, but no one did anything. They watched Jessica open the next gift, a big expensive stroller, and praise it loudly. My small simple box was already being buried under paper plates and used napkins. But they had no idea what was inside that box. They had no idea what Jessica had just thrown away. And as I sat there, frozen in my chair, I realized this was not a mistake. It was a message. The drive home with my son David was heavy with a silence that felt colder than the winter air outside. He kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I could feel the words we weren't saying screaming between us. The image of that little box in the trash played over and over in my mind. It wasn't about the gift, not really. It was the look in her eyes as she did it. It was the way the whole room turned on me in an instant. As David pulled up to my curb, he finally turned off the car and the silence became even heavier. "Mom, I'm so sorry about Jessica," he whispered, his voice cracking. I just nodded, too tired to fight, too hurt to speak. I opened my door to get out, wanting nothing more than to be alone in my quiet house. But then he said something that stopped me completely. "Mum," he said, his voice low and urgent, "can you do me a favor? A really big one?" I turned back to look at my son David. His face was filled with a fear I hadn't seen since he was a little boy afraid of the dark. "What is it?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "Please," he begged, "don't tell anyone what was really in the box. Just let it go. Please, Mum, for me." The way he pleaded with me, it wasn't just about his wife's feelings. He was truly scared of something. I didn't understand, but I saw the desperation in his eyes, so I agreed. I promised I would keep the secret. As I walked up the path to my front door, I felt a deep chill. It wasn't just the cold night air. I was protecting my son, but from what? Or from who? I closed the door behind me, the lock clicking into place. I was hiding the truth about a brand new car sitting in a dealership parking lot, and I had a terrible feeling that the reason why was much worse than a simple insult at a party. The next day, my phone rang. It was my daughter-in-law, Jessica. Her voice was dripping with fake sweetness. "I am so sorry about yesterday," she said. "I was so overwhelmed I just thought the box was empty. It was such a silly misunderstanding." The lie was so bold it almost took my breath away. She really thought I was that foolish. I stayed quiet, letting her talk, letting her dig her own hole. Then she said something strange. "We're just so stressed about money right now, you know. Every penny counts." It sounded like she was trying to make me feel guilty, to push me into giving them something else, but her words didn't make sense. My son, David, had a great job. They were comfortable. Why would she bring up money like that? It felt like a clue, but to a puzzle I couldn't see yet. And it made me wonder what other lies she was telling. Her lie about money stayed with me all day. It felt wrong. On a hunch, I made a quiet phone call to an old friend of my late husband, a man named George who still worked at the company where my son David was a manager. I made small talk, asked about his family, and then I casually asked how David was doing at work. George got quiet for a moment. "Carol," he said softly, "I'm sorry. I thought you knew." My heart dropped. "Knew what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "David was laid off a month ago," he said. "The whole department was let go." The phone felt heavy in my hand. Suddenly everything became clear. The stress, the fear in my son's eyes, Jessica's talk about money. The car wasn't just a generous gift. It was a lifeline that they desperately needed. and Jessica had just thrown it in the trash. The cruelty of it all was stunning. I sat there in my kitchen, the silence buzzing in my ears. David had lost his job. They were in trouble, and they were hiding it from me. My first thought was to call him, to tell him I knew and that I could help. But something held me back. They didn't come to me for help. Instead, Jessica chose to humiliate me. They chose lies and secrets. I realized I couldn't fix this by just giving them what they wanted. I picked up the phone again, but I didn't call my son. I called the car dealership. "Hi," I said, my voice steady. "I'm calling about the blue sedan I purchased last week." The manager remembered me. "Is there a problem with the keys?" he asked. "No," I said, looking at the spare key sitting on my counter. "I have a different question. I need to know about the car's title." A few days later, I was at the grocery store when I saw an old friend, Mary. Instead of her usual warm smile, she gave me a look of deep pity. "Carol, dear, are you feeling all right?" she asked, patting my arm. I told her I was fine, but she kept looking at me with worried eyes. "It's just that I spoke to Jessica," she said in a low voice. "She's so worried about you. She said you've been forgetful lately." I felt a cold shock. It wasn't just a lie. It was a story Jessica was telling people. She wasn't just being cruel, she was trying to make me seem like I was losing my mind. Why? To cover up what she did at the party? Or was it for another reason, something worse? I finished my shopping with a heavy heart. I was no longer just a hurt mother. I was a woman who was being painted as crazy by her own family, and I needed to find out why. I needed an excuse to see what was happening in that house. I baked a lemon cake, David's favourite, and drove over. When I got there, no one was home. I still had my old key, so I let myself in, just to leave the cake on the counter. The house was quiet and clean, but something felt wrong. My eyes went to the wall of family photos in the living room. My breath caught in my throat. The big photo in the middle, the one of me and my late husband at our wedding, was gone. In its place was a smiling picture of Jessica and her mother. It was a silent, brutal message. I was being erased. As I stood there, reeling, my eyes fell on a piece of paper on the kitchen counter. It looked like a printout of an email. I leaned closer to read it, and the words made my blood run cold. It was an email from Jessica to her mother, Karen. My hands shook as I read. "She's not getting the hint, Mum. The party didn't work. We need to push harder. If everyone thinks she's unstable, getting control of Dad's money will be so much easier." There it was in black and white. This was a plan, a cold, calculated war to take what my husband and I had built. The gift at the shower wasn't just a moment of anger. It was a move in their game. My heart pounded in my chest. This was worse than I could have ever imagined. They weren't just disrespecting me. They were trying to steal my future, my security, my husband's legacy. And they were using my love for my son as a weapon against me. I backed out of the kitchen, left the cake on the counter, and walked out of that house. I was no longer just a wounded mother. I was a woman with an enemy. When I got home, I felt a fire I hadn't felt in years. I went straight to the old wooden chest where I kept my late husband's most important things. I dug past old letters and photos until my fingers found it. His old leather-bound bank book from our savings account, an account I hadn't touched since he passed away. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I needed to see something solid, something real. I sat at my kitchen table and opened the book. I flipped through the pages, seeing all the deposits we had made over the years, saving for a rainy day. Then I saw it. Near the back of the book, a new entry. A huge withdrawal, for almost the exact price of the car. It was dated just 3 days before the baby shower, but I had never made that withdrawal. My name was next to it, but I had never signed for it. The next morning, I was sitting in the office of Mr. Harrison, the bank manager. He was a kind man who had known my husband for 30 years. My hands were steady as I pushed the old bank book across his polished desk. "I need you to look at this, please," I said. "This withdrawal. I didn't make it." He looked at the entry with a frown and typed something into his computer. He was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on the screen. He printed a piece of paper and looked at it, then back at the book, then at me. His face was pale. "Carol," he said slowly, "this is a copy of the withdrawal slip. The transaction is real." He turned the paper around for me to see. "The problem," he said, his voice low, "is the signature. There, at the bottom of the slip, was my name, written in a careful looping script. It was a very good copy of my signature, but it wasn't mine. The C was just a little too perfect. The L was a little too sharp. It was a forgery. Someone had walked into this bank, pretended to be me, and stolen the money I had saved with my husband. The money that I then used to buy the car." "Who?" I whispered, looking at Mr. Harrison. He shook his head. "We will start an investigation immediately. But Carol, for a forgery this good, it had to be someone with access to your signature, someone who has seen you sign things many times." My mind started racing, thinking of every document, every birthday card, every check I had ever signed. And then one single chilling memory came back to me. I remembered it clearly now. About a month ago, Jessica's mother, Karen, had come over. She was helping me sort through some old bills. She had asked a lot of questions about my banking, about where I kept my checkbook. At the time, I thought she was just being helpful, making friendly conversation. Now her friendly questions felt like she was gathering information. Her helpfulness felt like a trick. The anger was so hot and sharp it almost made me dizzy. This wasn't just Jessica. This was her mother too. Karen was in on it. Maybe she was even the one who planned it all. I decided right then that I was going to pay Karen a visit, but I wasn't going to ask her about the bank or the money. I was going to ask her about something else entirely, something she would never expect. And I was going to watch her face very, very closely when I did. I sat in Karen's perfectly clean living room, a cup of tea I didn't want in my hands. She was talking on and on about how sensitive Jessica was, how I needed to be more understanding. I listened quietly, letting her talk. I acted sad and confused, just like the old woman they thought I was. Then I looked at her with tears in my eyes. "I just don't understand," I said, my voice trembling. "I used the money from Robert's inheritance to buy that car. I thought she would love it." Karen's face changed. For a split second, a flash of anger crossed her eyes before she could hide it. "Well, that was your mistake," she snapped. "Jessica was just upset you used your husband's inheritance on a car instead of giving them the cash." And there it was. My heart went still. No one knew where that money came from. Not even David. I had never told a single soul which account I used. Only one other person could have known. My lawyer. The next day I sat in my lawyer's office. He looked nervous. I asked him directly, "Have you spoken to Karen, Jessica's mother?" He couldn't meet my eyes. He finally admitted that Karen had called him weeks ago. She had asked a lot of hypothetical questions about my accounts, about what was in my name and what was part of my late husband's estate. He thought he was being careful, but he had told her enough. She knew. Karen knew exactly which account held the money, and she knew it was a sacred fund I wouldn't normally touch. She had planned this all. She had found a way to get the money, and she had coached her daughter on how to manipulate and humiliate me. The betrayal was deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just my daughter-in-law, it was a conspiracy. And my own son was standing by, watching it all happen. I couldn't wait any longer. I called my son David and told him I was coming over. I said we needed to have a family meeting now. When I arrived, Jessica and her mother Karen were both there, sitting on the sofa like two queens. They had their story ready. I didn't raise my voice. I just calmly started laying out the facts. The whispers about me being unstable. The missing photograph. The forged signature at the bank. They denied everything. They called me confused and paranoid. Their faces were masks of fake concern and outrage. But I wasn't looking at them. I was looking at my son. He was pale, staring at the floor, unable to look at me. He knew it was all true. I could see the shame and guilt warring on his face. He knew everything and he had stayed silent. He had let them do this to me. Jessica saw that she was losing. She saw the look on David's face. In a panic, she turned to him, her voice sharp and cold. "Tell her, David," she demanded right there in front of me. "Tell your mother who she needs to help. Us or her." It was a cruel, impossible choice. She was making him choose between his wife and his mother. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my ears. I prayed he would do the right thing. My son, David, looked from Jessica's angry face to my pleading one. He stood frozen in the middle of the room. The silence stretched on, thick and heavy. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just dropped his head, unable to look at either of us. And his silence was the answer that shattered the last piece of my heart. He chose her. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The pain was still there, but a new feeling was rising up to meet it. Strength. I stood up from my chair. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was clear. "All right," I said, looking at all three of them. "I will make my decision about the gift in my own time." Jessica started to argue, but I held up a hand. "This conversation is over." I walked out of their house, not as a broken old woman, but as someone who finally understood the battle she was in. They thought this was about a car, about money. They were wrong. This was about respect. It was about my husband's memory. The little box with the keys might still be buried in the trash, but I was the only one who knew where the spare key was, and I was the only one who would decide what to do with it. That night there was a knock on my door. It was David, alone. His eyes were red, his face a mess. He collapsed into a chair in my kitchen and started sobbing like a little boy. And then it all came pouring out. He confessed everything. He knew about the car from the beginning. He knew about his mother-in-law's plan to get the money. He knew they were going to humiliate me at the party. "She said she would leave me," he cried. "She said if I didn't go along with her mother's plan, I would never see my baby. She said you had plenty of money and wouldn't miss it." He admitted he was a coward, that he was terrified of losing his new family. He had chosen to betray his own mother out of fear. He looked at me, his face full of shame. "Can you ever forgive me, Mum?" he begged. And for the first time, I didn't have an answer. Listening to my son confess his betrayal was a pain deeper than the one I felt at the party. It was one thing to be attacked by them, but to know my own child stood by and let it happen, it was a wound that I wasn't sure could ever heal. He kept crying, kept begging me to forgive him, to fix everything. He wanted me to make it all go away, just like I did when he was a boy who had scraped his knee. But I wasn't the same woman I was last week. The hurt had burned away some of my softness. I looked at the man my son had become, a stranger sitting in my kitchen. "I need you to leave," I said, my voice quiet but firm. The shock on his face was clear. He had expected me to hug him and say it was all okay. "I need to be alone," I said again. He slowly got up and walked to the door, and as it closed behind him, I felt utterly and completely alone. For a whole day and a whole night, I just sat in my quiet house. The anger was gone, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. I started to question everything. Was I being stubborn? Was my pride destroying what was left of my family? Maybe I should just call the dealership, have them deliver the car, give Jessica the money she wanted. Maybe I could buy back some peace. Maybe I could get my son back. I was so tired of fighting. For a moment, I actually picked up the phone to call David. I thought, I'll just give in. It's not worth all this pain. But as I held the phone, my eyes landed on a photograph on the mantelpiece. It was the last picture I had of me and my husband, Robert. He was smiling, his eyes so full of love and integrity. I looked at his picture, and I knew what he would tell me to do. He would tell me to stand up for myself. He would tell me our love was not for sale. My decision was made. The doubt was gone. I knew what I had to do. I got into my own car and started driving. I didn't go to my son's house. I didn't go to the dealership. I drove to the other side of town, to a place I hadn't visited in years. It was the Oakwood Women's Shelter, a place my husband and I used to donate to every Christmas. I parked the car and took a deep breath. My heart was pounding, but I felt calm. I walked through the doors and into the quiet front office. A kind-faced woman looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "My name is Carol, and I would like to speak to the director. I have something I would like to donate." I sat across from the shelter's director, a woman named Sarah. I told her the simple truth, that I had a brand new car, a family sedan, never driven, and that I wanted to donate it to the shelter, to give to a family who truly needed it. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She told me about a young mother with 2 children who had just escaped a bad situation. She had a new job, but no way to get there. A car would change her entire life. Hearing this, I knew I had made the right choice. This is what the car was for. Not to be a weapon in a family war, but to be a blessing to someone in need. We filled out the paperwork right there. As I signed my name on the donation form, a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. The car was no longer a symbol of my pain. It was about to become a symbol of someone else's hope. After the papers were signed, Sarah and I walked out to my car. "I'll just grab the owner's manual and the spare key from the dealership folder," I told her. "They should be in the glove compartment." I had driven the new car home just once from the dealership and parked it in my garage, so I knew everything was still inside. I opened the passenger door, leaned in, and opened the glove compartment. The folder from the dealership was right on top, but tucked behind it was a plain white envelope I had never seen before. My heart skipped a beat. It was addressed to me, and the handwriting, the familiar, strong script, it was my late husband's. He must have put it there when he was looking at cars with me, months before he passed. My hands trembled as I took it out. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a short, simple note. "My dearest Carol," it read. "If you are reading this, it means you got the car for our first grandbaby. I put the down payment on it myself, as a final surprise for our family. I hope it brings them years of safety and adventure, but more than anything, I hope you always remember your own strength. Protect our family, but protect your dignity first. I love you always. Robert." Tears streamed down my face. It was a final gift from him, a message of support from beyond. The car wasn't just my gift, it was our gift, and his words gave me all the strength I needed. He didn't say to keep the peace at all costs. He said to protect my dignity. I wiped my tears, closed the letter, and knew exactly what I had to do next. My fight wasn't over yet. I didn't have to say a word. The news found its own way. A few days later, my son, David, called me. He sounded frantic. "Mom, my friend Lisa, who volunteers at the women's shelter, she called me. She told me about this amazing anonymous donation, a brand new blue sedan." He was talking so fast he could barely breathe. "Mom, that's the car, isn't it? Tell me you didn't give away the car." His voice was full of disbelief and anger. He didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I was okay. He was just mad that his prize was gone. "I donated it to a family who needs it," I said calmly. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then I heard Jessica screaming in the background. A moment later, David was back on the line, his voice low and threatening. "You will regret this," he said, and hung up for a week. There was only silence. Then I got a text from David. It was a long, pleading message. He and Jessica wanted me to come over for dinner. They said they needed to explain, to apologize properly. They promised her mother wouldn't be there. "We can fix this, Mom. Please just give us one more chance." I knew it was a trap. It was their last desperate attempt to get what they wanted from me. My first instinct was to say no, to cut them out of my life for good. But then I thought of Robert's letter. Protect your dignity. Hiding wasn't protecting it. I needed to face them on my own terms. I texted back a simple reply. I will be there at 7. I wasn't coming to dinner to forgive them. I was coming to end this. And I was bringing something with me that they would never see coming. I walked into their house and the tension was so thick I could barely breathe. The table was set perfectly, a sad copy of a happy family dinner. Jessica and David started with shaky apologies, saying all the things they thought I wanted to hear. But it didn't take long for their true colours to show. The apologies turned into excuses, and the excuses turned into accusations. It was my fault for being so secretive. It was my fault for not understanding the pressure they were under. I just sat there listening. I let them say every single selfish, twisted word. I let them show me exactly who they were. When they finally ran out of steam, the room fell silent. Are you finished? I asked quietly. Jessica nodded, looking smug, as if she had won. Good, I said. Then I reached into my purse and placed a thin manila folder on the centre of the table. Jessica stared at the folder. What is that? She asked, her voice nervous. I opened it and slid a piece of paper across the table to her. It was a bank statement. Not mine, but hers. From an online account I had found after hiring a private investigator. An account that showed she was thousands and thousands of dollars in debt to online gambling sites. Her face went white. All the smugness, all the anger drained away, replaced by pure terror. You weren't trying to get money for a new life, I said, my voice low and steady. You were trying to pay off a secret debt. You were desperate. David stared at his wife, his mouth open in shock. Jessica, is this true? He whispered. She started to cry, and in that moment the whole web of lies finally fell apart. Her mother knew, and they were willing to destroy me to save her from the consequences of her own actions. I looked at the wreckage of my family, my sobbing daughter-in-law, my shocked and broken son. There was no victory here, only sadness. But there was also truth. For the first time, everything was out in the open. I reached into my pocket and took out the spare car key. I slid it across the table. It came to a stop in front of Jessica. The car is gone, I said softly. I can't help you with your debt. That is a mess you have to clean up yourselves. I stood up to leave. But the path to forgiveness is not gone. It is just very, very long, and it starts with truth. I looked at my son. You will both have to earn back my trust, one honest day at a time. It's up to you if you want to walk that path. I left the key on the table, a symbol of everything they had lost, and walked out the door, back into my own life, finally free. Friend, thank you for staying with me to the very end. If you believe that strength isn't about how you fall, but how you get back up, then please tap subscribe and join our community. You won't want to miss the stories we share next.